Republic of Guyana, and today, like always, we are covering issues and expecting a certain level of transparency from the present administration. And I'm hoping this would be informative for you, the viewers, and in understanding where this government is going and what you can expect from this administration. Dr. Jagdeo, thank you again for this opportunity. We're going to go right in to it, and I have been following you for the last week going across different regions. And what you are promising is astronomical. And this is reminiscent of the past administration. I can remember when I voted for APNU in 2015. They made so much of promises. I thought money would have fallen from the sky. You literally went to Berbice Region 6, told 7,000 workers you getting 250,000 Guyana dollars. Nobody has ever done anything like that before. You yesterday went to Wales. Almost 1,700 workers are going to be getting 200,000 Guyana dollars. This is reminiscent of the past administration that made astronomical promises and never delivered. Please explain.
Well, we take our promises seriously. If you trace the history of the PPP in government, you could easily go back to every manifesto that we presented and examine what we did in the 5 years subsequent to the presentation of the manifesto to the populace when we were seeking their vote. And you would see that we've accomplished almost everything we promised in our manifesto, maybe 90% of the promises, and even in other sectors, much more than we had promised. And so too, in the last several years, when we were in opposition, we presented a manifesto to the population in March 2020, and when people voted for us. And we carefully examined what we had to do to return Guyana to prosperity. And consequent with that goal, subsequently, we launched a series of programs which we placed in our manifesto. And so now we are just implementing them. And so you shouldn't be very surprised that we have started doing this. Because for Guyana to prosper, we had to do a number of things. We had to, first of all, reverse the massive amounts of taxes that APNU had placed on people. They came into office in 2015 arguing that they would lower taxes. By the time they left office, they had increased the tax burden by over $40 billion more per annum. They're leaving out the growth in taxes based on the expansion of the economy. We had to reverse that. In the first budget, we reversed most of those taxes. So today, how is it different than a year ago when APNU was in office? That under the PPP, people are allowed to keep $40 billion more in their pockets that APNU was taking in higher taxes. And this comes from VAT on electricity, on water, on data, on medical supplies, on hinterland travel, on food items, on a whole range of other issues. It comes from taxes on land charges, higher land charges that had increased by 500%. That is how they came. The 40 billion came up. They had done all of these things. We reversed these, and so people are paying 40 billion less in taxes. Now people wonder how could you have done this without killing the budget and creating a bigger fiscal deficit? Because simultaneously with giving back to the people, we have cut expenditure on administration significantly by billions of dollars. So we have eliminated a lot of the wastage and extravagance, the huge food in government, the massive amounts they spend on buying vehicles and transportation. You know, up to now, I'm using the Land Cruiser that I had since 2010. It's the same vehicle I'm using up to now, throughout the period in as ex-president, then as opposition leader, and up to now. Because it's a functional vehicle. We don't need really a new vehicle. It's working well. But these guys went on a splurge. You know, they just came in, they saw the money that is there that we had saved, they used it up on higher rentals and food in government and all of those things. So we have done that, and that allows us to fulfill more of our promises. We have returned the grant to the school kids that they said they couldn't afford. Return it, and even more than what it was, $15,000 per child per year, and we've extended that now to kids going to private schools. And we intend, I said to the people in Berbice, I said to all of those who I spoke with, that for every school child in this country, by the time we get to 2025, the 5 years of the PPP administration, we would get it up to $50,000 per year per child. Similarly, we promised a double old age pension. We've increased it by 25%. It will double in the 5 years. We promised free university education. It will happen before the end of the period. We promised 20,000 scholarships. This year, 6,000 has been given. We're fulfilling our promises. And I had promised the sugar workers too, that the callous way they were treated, the unconscionable way that they were treated, it had nothing, it was not grounded on economics, and I do not want to get into that argument now, because you have a lot of silly people out there who make that argument. It had nothing to do with economics. It had to do with racism. APNU is the only racist party. Today, I saw Norton complaining about the sugar workers getting $250,000, who they severed unconscionably, refused to pay them even their severance. People would work 25 years in the industry. But he forgets that he said it's a racist act. He forgets that a significant part of the sugar workers who were laid off were also Afro-Guyanese at Wales, in Berbice. And also, the APNU were the ones who boasted that they increased public sector salaries by 70% in the 5 years. In the 5 years, the sugar workers did not get any increase in any of the 5 years. Zero for the 5 years. The sugar workers used to enjoy the annual production incentive. They took that away. Apart from the 7,000 who were fired. If that's not an act of racism, nothing is. When you look at the employment patterns, Indo-Guyanese, Amerindians, 2,000 Amerindians were terminated the moment they took office. The only racist party in this country is the PNC. And that's the only thing that they can talk about to mobilize people. But we promised to help the sugar workers, like we promised to help the pensioners and the kids of every race, every religion. And like we're helping people in Linden now get back what they had under the PPP. We had a call center that was operating under the PPP that I established when I was president. 88 persons were working there. APNU closed it down. We've just reopened it. 150 persons will work in Region 10, in Linden, find jobs. We're doing an employment program now, and for next year, about maybe 8,000 people will get temporary employment whilst we working to boost the economy. And will be people from every region in the country, every single region. We've rehired 2,000 of the Amerindians who were terminated. correcting that historical injustice. We promised to do so. So we believe in keeping our promises. And I can list almost everything. You know, we've had setbacks too. We have had some inflation. You know, price have moved up because of the pandemic. Production in many parts of the world have stopped, so the price of the commodities have become higher, foodstuff, etc. The cost of importation because of higher shipping costs has gone up, but we'll get over that too. And we are clearly focused on doing the things we promised. We promised 50,000 new house lots. We already gave out 6,000. We're now busy building maybe a couple thousand of houses already for different categories of people. We'll do that, and the jobs will come. Not just 50,000, but even more than 50,000 jobs that we promised. So I don't, we are very different than APNU. So I resent the fact that you're trying to compare me or my party with utterances by APNU. I guess you need to reassess the position. You see the qualitative difference between the two parties. One party that thrives on rigging elections, trying to steal elections. You saw that, a blatant attempt before your very eyes. You got cussed out for speaking the truth. And you should never make the mistake of equating us. One party has no track record of achievement. I dealt with that in the meeting yesterday. What has APNU got that it can boast about when its first term the PNC was in office? It's left, we are starving, we are heavily indebted, the economy was in doldrums, no social services, we are a pariah state, you know, we were undemocratic, considered one a country that thrived on Reagan. Then in the last 5 years, no different. So it's a little bit hurtful that a man who's been around so long would think that we are the same. We're not the same. And a party that has thrived on racism. My party has tried to bring people together notwithstanding what some of these clowns talk about, like Norton and the others, because they only thrive on racism. They believe, the sugar workers, these people who work for 25 years, mustn't get any help after they treat them there. They generated the wealth. Parasites like Norton want to eat up all the money in government. They would order a meal that would cost $400,000 when they were in government for a few people at the fancy restaurant. The same Norton, in 1992 when we got into office, he left a lot of unpaid bills. He was in the High Commission in London. Tons of unpaid bills. And today, these guys, they're still around, the fossils, still around, trying to divide our people. Talking nonsense.
Dr. Jagdeo, me being an individual on the ground, I receive a lot of complaints because we do frequent interviews. Yeah. People would say, get this message to the vice president. And through my interviews, I ask the questions that address the people's concerns.
I see you're trying to absolve yourself from saying it's the people making you answer these questions, not you yourself.
Well, I clearly said is the promises. And okay. What happened is the promises.
But critic, you on the ground, you must see a qualitative difference between these two parties.
Mm-hmm. Vast difference.
Yes.
But nonetheless, I am following you, and these are major promises.
Yes.
For instance, the 250, you said you would have helped the sugar workers, but the 250 was not in the manifesto.
No.
These are things that are just adding up.
And that's 1.8 billion, but that's 1.8 billion. But look what we have done too. The flood relief. We've helped people who've had a flood. COVID grant. That went to each household. We didn't promise that too. We gave it to people. So it's not just what we promised. It's things that we did not even promise that we're delivering on because it's bringing benefits to our people. We didn't promise 120 tractors to each Amerindian village, but we bought 120 tractors and trailers and are delivering it now to the villages to improve agriculture and transport. So I'm telling you, they're not only the things we promised. There are lots of other things that we didn't even promise that we're delivering on because it's changing the lives of our people. So that's important. And one difference with our party is that we cost everything. We make sure that we can afford it. We try to seek out the financing before we speak. We don't speak glibly about things. You know, if we say we plan to do something, it meant that a lot of thought has gone into it, a lot of calculations, studies, probably, you know, assessing where the resources are going to come from. Some people just go talk and then they don't even think about it because they had no intention of fulfilling it. Like, you know, Granger and his Green State and all of that nonsense that you had in the last, make it, what it was a good life for everyone. That sort of slogan, they work a lot with slogan. APNU is a party that sloganeers well. It does well and it traps people in these slogans and get them to repeat it. Like a girl sent me a note, she's Afro-Guyanese, very supportive of the PPP. And her friends in New York are saying to her, oh, the PPP is bad because she defends the party. And tell us one thing that the PPP did good since they came into office, returned to office. And I just listed all these things that we were reversing from APNU days, and they're still asking about one good thing we did. That is because those would never listen, some of them, to reasoning. They would sloganeer all the time. Listen to the vile nonsense that a Norton or a Sherrod Duncan will say on TV without thinking.
Dr. Jagdeo was saying, being on the ground, it affords me an opportunity to hear directly from the people. Sure. And recently, I've been getting a lot of opposition supporters asking, what is the PPP? Because they're becoming worried now.
Yes.
What is the PPP, or how does the PPP plan to address this destructive method being used by the opposition? Look, recently, the teachers' unions seem to have been infiltrated and tried to create much confusion,
yes,
which they had to take a step back when they realized the mistake that they made.
Mm-hmm.
How does the PPP plan to address the methods of destruction? New York had a protest where they were calling to burn places, burn the place down. And now you have Brick Dam Station getting burned down. You got a lot of places, fire at NIS, fire at different ministries. How does the PPP, and again, this affects a lot of the people who works in the with government is APNU supporters.
Yeah,
so they're worried, what's going to happen to my job in this mass destruction that they're trying to create? What kind of calm can you bring? What is the government planning to do to bring calm to all Guyanese? How do we address this destructive method being displayed by the opposition?
Well, as it relates to the fires, it seems as though there is a pattern. I do not want to be premature in accusing anyone of anything at this point in time, but it's a worrying trend. And what is particularly concerning is that it followed several statements that were made by APNU supporters or leaders. You just mentioned the protest rally in New York about burning the city here. David Hines going to Victoria Village and in a mad rant. And it can only be characterized as an insane rant, said to people, you must do everything to really bring down this government. Undermine the government. And you saw the bitterness on his face, etc. And people like David Hines, who have misled people for decades that they represent African interests, but were really parasites, had no interest in any development in Guyana, much less development for Afro-Guyanese, but played on. They wrote a few newspapers and they were beating their chests as Afro rights activists, black rights activists, but were really parasitic. They came into government, and what did they do in 5 years? He was in the center of the APNU coalition. Never mind, they contrive differences that from occasionally they try to show between the WPA and PNC, but they're the same now. They're exactly the same. They had one agenda, and that was to engorge themselves, grow fat on the government. They had no intention of helping anybody. Look at the results of it. The only time Afro-Guyanese became important to them were around election time and after they lost the elections. But look at the things that they did in government. It affected a lot of Afro-Guyanese, maybe disproportionately. And so he is smarting from the personal loss of privileges that he and his family enjoyed and the perks that they enjoyed. We had people, you remember Sarah, almost the entire leadership of the WPA. Many of them are past retirement age, long past retirement age, but were earning $700,000-800,000 a month for doing nothing, absolutely nothing. They didn't recover any asset that they were set up to recover. So the bitterness comes out. So he wants to undermine the government. Then the New York thing. And then, so that's why it's worrying. It seems as though on the face of it, that it's steered that all of these are not isolated, unrelated events, the fires. And I saw this stupid excuse that, they're pushing around, the PPP burned down Brick Dam because the PPP wants to give its friends, contractor friends, the work to rebuild. Well, if we wanted to do that, give the contractors to rebuild or build, we didn't have to burn down Brick Dam. We could give them to build anything, a new school like they did with BK and all of the others,
Or just different stations.
Stations, you can build 100 stations more. It's stupid. And they just gave out a ton of people because that's what they were practically doing, steering contracts to a few preferred bidders. But for me, I have a longer term memory, and that I've spoken to the president about this, that we may need external assistance. One time the FBI was helping us, that in the period when they had employed criminal activities to try to displace the government by supporting the escapees in Buxton, and they were directly linked to Congress Place, that the fire that took place at the Ministry of Health was done deliberately. And when we looked at what happened, it involved a former member of the judiciary, who is still around. It involved a person who is now one of the leading advocates. He says he's a media person. And it involved a drug dealer who had gone up to the United States of America, who was financing that media person, who was a political activist at that time and was led an assault on the office of the president. And so when the fire took place, just before they fired the Ministry of Health, a call was made to this individual in the United States. And then we traced the call from this person's phone. And then after the fire, another call. This was in the wee hours of the morning. And we had asked the US for help at that time. And so it has some similar patterns to that fire. And as I said, I don't want to be premature, but it would be worth it if we have external assistance on this matter to bolster our investigative capability and to trace if there are terrorist acts, then to trace these. And this is domestic terrorism I'm talking about. That's how you have to treat it. And so we are going to be on our guard. We'd have to keep that perspective in mind whilst not getting paranoid, whilst not becoming paranoid and running only after that, forgetting that we are here to really change people's lives and to develop the country.
But Dr. Jagdeo, as much as you have to maintain a certain level of equilibrium, as you said, not getting paranoid, the PPP, more than any other party, has the information and had the experience of how the opposition operates when it wants to get its hands on power. Now, when there were the dark days, the PNC just wanted to get into power, maybe to control the coffers. There is so much more to fight for at this time. Do you see the PNC launching attacks like we've never seen before in light of PPP's experience, the country's past experience openly? Funerals were kept, people were criminals, were called freedom fighters, supported. This was openly done. Funerals were kept at the Square of the Revolution.
Yes.
So there's no paranoia in the people's past experience with the opposition when they want to get their hands on power, in light of the fact that there's so much more now than then.
Paranoia is not a useful condition in which to do clinical analysis. And so I'm not suggesting that we should avoid in-depth clinical analysis or analyses of the situation. That has to be done, and it is, trust me, it is being done. It is to ensure that we don't get too distracted and it becomes the prevailing state of mind. It was their paranoia about us to some extent that led them to hung us for 4 years. I had to go to Soku, Ramatar, Luncheon, Samuel Hines, almost everybody every day. And they forgot that they were elected to run the country, to produce wealth for and benefits for everyone. And it is the paranoia combined with their racism that caused them to implement many of their policies that led to their demise. And in a free society, the methods that they are hoping to use or they may hope to use will not succeed. And especially in this environment now. When our capabilities were even less and our contacts and friends globally were even smaller, we managed to fight off the excesses of APNU's violence and, well, PNC's violence and their domestic terrorism. Our capabilities today are immensely greater. And I'm not talking just about, I'm not talking about firepower. I'm talking about the combination of linkages, etc. We'll quickly isolate who they are, and they would face the full force of the law. We'll quickly isolate who they are if they think they want to go down that route. So we have to be vigilant, and trust me, we are vigilant. We're watching this, we're analyzing the situation, but they themselves know that with all they tried through street protests, they tried through combining with criminals, they're trying to tamper with elections, and none of that displaced us. We survived. It was only through free and fair elections. People have doubts about 2015, whether it's free and fair, but I say we lost. because that's, you had to admit that. But it was only through free and fair elections. It's only when they convinced people like you that they could have done better than we did that they really won. And they're not anywhere near convincing the next generation now. And they managed to do that because they had been out of office for such a long time that people forgot who the old PNC was. And they gave them a stark reminder in the last 5 years, particularly the 5 months after the elections, who they really are, that they've never really changed. So if they think they're misleading young people again, particularly young people who supported the PPP traditionally, a lot of them who had moved in 2015, they have another thing coming. People know. Their best bet now is to work on a national agenda. There is always room for parties that work on a national agenda, who have a positive outlook about the country. So they have to allow the forces that want that to emerge in the party. Secondly, they have to drop racism as a mobilizing tool. That's very difficult for them to do because they don't have no track record of achievement. They can't campaign on that. They have very limited planning skills, as they've demonstrated in the last 5 years. So they can't even talk about a vision and plan for it. But it's the only way. It's a dead end if they don't drop it, racism. And if they do those two things, then I've always made it clear there is room for inclusion. There's room for working together, provided people understand that you have to work for people's support and vote. You can't try to steal it. They have to come to that realization. You can't bully them into supporting you. You can't lie to them. They'd find out. And so we have held that out here all the time. We put it in our manifesto. We've not been shy about saying this. But the other part will not only not lead them to being out of power for a longer time, the path of aggression and violence, it will also have devastating consequences for many of them individually who think they want to pursue that path. And because they're going to face the full force of the law.
Dr. Jagdeo, there seems to be a new trend. Although the AFC seems to have, over the past year, dissolved into nothingness, they have been able, the opposition leader has gone into the dark, and it seems to be a new opposition leader, someone with compelling powder, confusion powder, Cheryl Duncan, one of the MPs. Mm-hmm. The AFC seems to be taking the lead on propaganda, the creation of confusion and the spilling of their confusion powder. Is the PPP recognizing this and recognizing how the PNC has fallen back and taking the lead, or being led or misled by the AFC?
Yeah, they, I think this is very telling. Now we have an ineffective opposition leader. Not that I should argue for an effective opposition leader, but I believe it's a disgrace to the position because it seems as though 5 years in government did not equip him with even a basic understanding of even how government functions. And he demonstrates from more often than not a shallow understanding of sectors that are crucial to the development of the country. So he gives these perfunctory answers to questions and then gets into a fight with the reporter about content. You can get into a fight over principle and all of that, but when you don't know something, you don't know it, and then trying to pass it on to a reporter. So I've seen that. It's pathetic. And then I saw he disappeared for a long while. I heard he was abroad seeking medical attention. He went to Suriname and then flew to Ghana. We don't know where he was for the last month or two. Then I heard that Roysdale Ford is the acting opposition leader, and I don't know what that means because there is no such constitutional post as acting opposition leader. And then Roysdale Ford himself is beset with a lot of scandals, as you know. And then, as you correctly pointed out, the new opposition leader is really Sherrod Duncan. And he seems to set the agenda for the entire party and the opposition, you know, with some program he has. I haven't seen the program. I have not watched it, but I heard that every night he goes on that program, and it's vile, and it's very personal to many people, and it's very capricious. And I'm trying to find a word to describe when kind of catty, like it's like, you know, like you're in a girl fight over a lot of things, you know, that kind of thing. He gets very angry over little things and stuff like that, but that's the opposition leader. So he sets the agenda for APNU, and it's all about racism and confusion. So it's very sad that a political party with a long history that started in 1955, like the PNC, would now reduce itself to where it is today, to have a rascal like Sherrod Duncan, a man who was implicated in many scandals for hustling money at the Chronicle and everywhere else that he's gone to. He is now the person who sets the agenda for that political party and for the country. Oh, not for the country, definitely not. I made a mistake in saying that, at least for them.
Dr. Jagdeo, I know you got some other meetings to go to. You just afford us this opportunity. In closing.
And I wonder, I wonder also what people like, since you mentioned Sherrod Duncan, I wonder what the one in New York, what's his name again? Rickford Burke.
We call him,
yes.
Rickford Tight Pants Burke.
Tight Pants Burke, who, so I gather his organization makes quite a bit of money from these protests that he organizes through donations. So it may be a way of, he might have a clever way now, like the David Hines and the others, of living off protests or making protests a business. And it mightn't be so stupid. He might be a very clever person, because I gather, I don't know if he really is a lawyer or not, but I'd say Hardy says he's a lawyer, but that's disputed. So you notice a few things. He doesn't act so stridently on some matters. When we had to deal with the Haitian situation, the smuggling of thousands of Haitians through Guyana, that we're sure would have ended up on some report globally of the IOM or some State Department report that Guyana facilitates smuggling of Haitians through its territories. That would have eventually been the report, because it was happening with frequency and over a long period. And you recall Felix saying, oh, he doesn't know where people are. But you had gangs operating in Guyana and in Haiti that were bringing people through for money. The people's passports were taken away from them. We found some cases abandoned here. So we had to address it. And what we did, we said, we're going to approach it like some of the Caribbean did. Most of the countries will return to a situation where you require a visa. Now, most of the countries in CARICOM have a visa. They're not racist, but we became racist because we wanted to end people smuggling. So I saw Rick Fordberg organize a protest in Queens and invited the Haitians to join racism in Guyana. And Hakeem Jeffries and all of the others were there. And then it struck me as very ironic. And Rick Fordberg saying, oh, we're the Democrats. And we run things in New York. And it struck me as ironic when the Biden administration started picking up Haitians at the border and flying them back to Haiti, just like that, who had sought asylum and who had gone through a long trip from Haiti through Guyana, up through Brazil, going up through Central America, reached the United States. They picked them up there, flew them back to Haiti directly, dropped them off there. Thousands. And so I was wondering how Hakeem Jeffries and Rick Fordberg, I don't hear them talk about that being racism. Is the Biden administration racist because they're Democrats? Nobody says anything about that any longer. So it happens over there. And these same guys who were pushing this, they were saying, oh, it's racism in Ghana.
Are you suggesting that their attitude towards your administration is one of convenience for them?
It's convenience, and it's a racist, and it's about money. And second, the same thing happened with vaccines. First, it was about us trying to get Afro-Guyanese. The PPP was trying to kill out Afro-Guyanese. That's how it started. And then President Biden started making vaccine mandates. The before us saying, if you're in the federal government and you don't get a vaccine, you get fired. And all of that. So that doesn't, what is done in the developed world wasn't racism. But they were protesting that in the early period. But you notice they've gone quiet on it, people like Burke, etc. Because the convenience of it all. And here in Guyana, we've had to say, oh, we had a more nuanced approach. We said vaccines or PCR tests. And our children, we said, encourage them to get the vaccine, but we're not making it compulsory for kids. They can go to school even if they're unvaccinated, because we wanted to get our children back into school. And look at the teachers union, you mentioned that right at the beginning. Coretta McDonald trying to politicize the vile things that she spread as an opposition MP. She took it straight into the union. But all we were trying to do is to get these kids back to school, and we were hoping to do so with the cooperation of the teachers. They were urging the teachers not to cooperate. Thankfully, many of our teachers are hardworking and they have a heart, and they wanted to see the kids go back to school because many of them cannot afford the virtual education and they were falling back. And it should be the collective resolve of all Guyanese to get our kids back into school. So we're going to have these people, the racists, the carpetbaggers, constantly. We're going to have them on our backs for many years to come. It's an industry they have. They make money, they do well on this sort of thing. You're not going to get rid of them soon. But we have to forge ahead in spite of them. And this is one thing that the PPP has done. If we are convinced that the projects that we pursue or the initiatives we pursue good for people, we forge ahead. We believe that people would ultimately understand. Like we're forging ahead with the hydro and the pipeline, not because we're arrogant, because we know at the end of the period we can cut people electricity prices by half. We can supply cheaper gas to them for cooking, you improve their lives. We can then, our businesses become more competitive because they don't have to pay massive light bills from manufacturing and all of that. We employ more of our people. Not because we're arrogant, but because we want to see this country change. So it's interesting. But that's a reality of our country.
Dr. Jagdeo, do you think, with almost 700 people dying from COVID, do you think the government's protection of persons' identity has worked against the government. For instance, persons from all walks of life have died from coronavirus. Many opposition supporters and members. Only recently, Imran Khan died, not even having the vaccine. One of the persons who were tasked with disseminating information, one of the persons who should have known better than anyone else, he's a part of the opposition, died. There are a number of persons, high profile persons, you only see those in the media. And if this government was open about the persons who have been dying, they will realize a huge number of those people, in the 700, almost 700, are opposition supporters. Has the protection of people's identity who've been dying worked against this government, you think, to some extent?
Yeah, but it's a medical thing, and I do not think that you should really, for the sake of politics, look at people's health care, health, etc., etc. And you need to have some, for their family's sake too, not just for their politics or for public trends. You have to also safeguard that, because it's a very personal thing, people's health status and deaths and all of that. So governments always have to be respectful. These guys, they're not respectful of anything, but that's the nature of the PNC. We knew President Hoyt had cancer. The whole country knew that. And I made it clear that on the campaign trail, when I spoke with all of our speakers, I said our messages would be consistent. Nobody will on the campaign trail talk about Mr. Granger's cancer or his sickness. That's health. We will not talk about it. Once or twice someone did it, and I called them and I said, stay away from that. They have been very, very vile at a personal level. Even, I don't want to say this, but weeks before Mr. Imran Khan contracted COVID, he, through fake profiles and many others, were pushing the line that I'm not in the public domain now because I have cancer. I saw I'm doing cataract surgery. It's not true, but even if it were, that's not something that helps people's health status, that you really go after. I know Harman has health issues, but I will never make that a public issue. That I can campaign enough and get my ideas over without talking about Harman's health issue. So these things are very important, but the facts are very clear. The facts are very clear, and it shocked me too. I did not know that Mr. Imran Khan didn't get the vaccine. But for somebody I thought who was in the forefront of advocacy on their behalf, then he would have been urging people to get vaccinated. But when I look at Figueroa saying to people you can use bush medicine, sometimes you wonder what is the view of the party, to have so many, that if is there a public view, like a public opinion on one thing, also we say the right things, get vaccinated because vaccines save lives, and then there's the undertone to people don't get vaccinated, the whisper campaign. As they're very good at that. They say, we are party for all Guyana, we believe in social cohesion, and then in the whisper campaign spread the racism. So that party uses issues conveniently and politically, issues that should not really be used to divide our people. Their evidence is clear. 70% of our people have at least the first dose, adults. 30% are unvaccinated. Of the 30% unvaccinated, 90% of the deaths are coming from the 30% who are unvaccinated. 90% of the deaths, over 90% actually, the hospitalization and the deaths. It's quite clear. Globally, you've seen the evidence. That's what they should be doing, urging people to. So I don't want to make the whole issue of the coronavirus an issue that divides us. I know that it's a political thing, and I hope it's not utilized. It's a very low life kind of thing to utilize things that affect people's welfare and their well-being to divide the country or mislead them.
Dr. Jagdeo, your administration is in the process of continuously rolling out different support to Guyanese, flood relief as of recent.
Yeah.
There has been a bit of confusion, and I know you've been talking about it when you meet different individuals.
Sure.
But there has been some shortcomings in the system as it relates to the disbursement. Some people have been displaced, and some individuals have received who should not have gotten. Can you tell a lot of people? Continuously, different sectors want to hear about that.
Sure.
Can you tell us what is being put in place to ensure transparency and accountability?
Sure. So, before we disbursed any money, we made it clear, unlike with the assistance where we were going to house, we were giving people cash because we didn't want them. It was in the COVID era too. Lots of our people were not vaccinated. So we didn't want to give checks. Then they had to converge on some points to encash a check only for 25,000. So we did cash assistance to households, and they managed to go to most households in the country. A lot of people received their assistance, the majority of our households. We had some who had issues through the pink slip. We're still working through that to ensure that those families get. And some people may be left out. They were not home. Like I gave an example of my sister. She didn't get her money. She wasn't home. She didn't have a pink slip. So they are left out. But it helped most people. And in government, you cannot let a 1% failure, which often happens on the ground. Because remember, when you send out, you have to send out 100 teams to go to cover every house in this country to get it done within a particular period. You can always have some shenanigan in one household or a couple of households. You'd never even know about it. But you can't say, we're not going to do anything because that may take place. Then you don't help anyone. So that happened. In this case, we said the flood assistance will go through checks. So it's traceable. So we have checks now, not cash. We made it clear to the Ministry of Agriculture that the assessments have to be done clearly and through the extension officers and others. Came up with over 60,000 persons. But a lot of the 60,000 are mainly like households. So they'll get about $50,000 and some will get about 100,000. That lost their farms, the little kitchen garden. Some have commercial garden, some lost household appliances and stuff. So they came up with the names. We said the names should be published in the areas, put up somewhere. So that was done. They started distributing. So they haven't completed that as yet. And then some people made claims. They said, not too many, but a few, and especially the big ones, that a few people got money who they shouldn't get. So we've been saying, tell us who the names are. We've had maybe about 15 names so far that I saw. And they're checking those names. And then a lot of people more who said many didn't think we were serious about the flood relief. Then they started coming in. So we said we can't just process you. You have to be verified. So their names were left off. So that is what created the confusion. Some people started saying, oh, I didn't get any money, and others saying, well, there are some people who got it. So what I did, it was creating too much problems on the ground. And then there were claims that some of the people who went out to collect the names put names that they shouldn't have put. So I was in Berbice, and it's mainly in Berbice because the Region 3 and the other areas haven't started rolling out as yet. So we are going to put a mechanism in place for 1 month or so, 3 weeks to a month, where at different points, if you're not on the list, you can come and put your name down. And then we'll have to go out and verify. And if we verify that you actually did lose, you will get. And then also we're asking people, since you're calling us to say some people didn't got who shouldn't have gotten, will you give us some names? You can do so anonymously even, of who shouldn't really have gotten. And then we'll check those and take appropriate action. So I think it could be remedied. The complaints are few, but you know, in social media, it gets magnified. But I think we can resolve it with this mechanism. So you give people still another chance to come in, those who didn't get, and to put down their names, and to also help us in weeding out a few who may have gotten.
Dr. Jagdeo, in one case, the agriculture minister, when he visited the hoop, he literally had to put a pause on a check that someone would have received who should not have received. Can we see people literally being charged for dishonestly receiving government's money?
I think that we may have to, especially larger people, the larger ones where the claims are bigger. Because at the low end, you know, you tend to be the 50,000 and you tend to be a bit more flexible on people. But yes, possibly that. But once it could be verified that there was a total blatant illegal act, then why not? But it's very, very hard for government to control, especially in large scale tasks like that, where 60,000 people are involved, to check every single person individually. But as I said before, you still have to forge ahead with initiatives to help people. Because how do you not help the 99% who are genuine and want you, because you're worried about the 1% who might try to poke you in the eye?
Dr. Jagdeo, basically Region 6 and Region 3, the West Dem area, has gotten their Christmas. Most likely they'll be having 7,000 in Region 6, going to be having 200,000 for 7,000 people. That is going to create a blooming atmosphere in the economy. And 1,700 with $250,000, so Wales here is going to be doing well. What can the rest of the country expect for Christmas? It's coming fast.
Well, but this is how we say it. This can be seen as a Christmas gift. Critic, you have to go. I would like many of APNU's supporters to see the story of many of the sugar workers of every race. What happened when APNU took away their jobs, that they didn't have to. I would like them to see what took place with those families. There's a fallacy that many Indo-Guyanese, all Indo-Guyanese are rich. Those people went from not being able to having a decent living, providing food on the table, sending their kids to school. They get up at 5 a.m. in the morning, sometimes 4:30, to reach the bag dam for 6 a.m. to cut the cane. They start in the morning, 4:30 traveling to go and cut the cane. After 25 years, you know what the severance was for many of them? 400, 500,000, 600,000. Maybe maximum million for most of the workers. After 25 years of doing that, contributing in the good and bad times to this economy, there was a time when sugar carried the economy, everything else. the workers' benefits. And what they did callously, whilst they were busy splurging elsewhere, just to send those kids. I saw some, heard the stories because people used to come to my office, but I wish a bigger cross section would see that. So this 250,000 is just some reparative justice. It is, and it's not a lot of money. Hopefully it would help people as we try to find other jobs for them to absorb them back into the economy. It would help them a little bit. So it's not like, oh, a Christmas gift to buy, fancy thing, a bottle of wine and some maybe fancy cheese or something to eat for Christmas. Many of them will be taking care, buying basics for it, using this money just to survive. And so, but that is not all, because the public service will get their increase. The public servants will get a salary increase. The sugar workers will get a salary increase before the end of the year. So the salary increases are coming for the public service and sugar workers, which haven't been done as yet. There are lots of other activities. But I don't want it to be seen like as a Christmas gift. You should really see the stories of those families and see how the hardships that people had when Ramjatan was busy drinking vodka in the parliament paid for by the taxpayers of this country. They were out there, the ones who had toiled for years, 20-something years, etc. I met a young, well, not so young, black guy yesterday at Wales. And he said to me, the last bundle of cane at Wales, he was standing there with another Afro-Guyanese comrade. And he said, ask this guy, the last bundle of cane at Wales, I was there when we fetched it out, over 25 years. And he said, I cried. The last bundle of cane. And maybe we should get him to tell his story. A young black guy. Last bundle of cane, he said he cried, because for 25 years he had been there, put his whole life in it. So I was saying to him, we are to retrain now, lots of activities will come here. That is what he's looking for. The 250,000 is not like a big money or bonus for him. It is almost like us saying back to them that we value what you did, for the country values what you did. And the last 25 years, when we got into office in 1990, the sugar levy was maybe over 50% of total government revenue. The levy from the sugar industry alone was practically carrying the whole country. And they were contributing this. So now when people nitpick about, oh, you're spending a little money here or there, or some money, it rubs me the wrong way.
Dr. Jagdeo, we have covered a lot, and I don't want going back into politics because we've ended on a real positive note there.
Yeah, sure.
And it shows, I'm a little emotional because it shows outside of the politics a politician that cares. And I am on the ground and hearing the people's issue, and I feel confident that with media and if we have to get a proper opposition holding the PPP administration accountable, I think Guyana is going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So thank you for this opportunity once again.
Okay, thank you.